And welcome in yet again to the Blitz podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Kane Schwartz, and I'm joined by my fellow hosts, my fellow analysts, my fellow Blitz Pod member, Mr. Jaden Kozak, who's been grinding out these graphics and grinding out all these power rankings. How's it been, man? How are we feeling? Like almost to the halfway point? Like not really, but we're getting there.
Yeah, feeling pretty good. Excited to be nearing that halfway point. I think today with Denver, like specifically, kind of symbolizes a tier up in my mind anyway. Like I feel like the Packers were the last of those teams where we were like, I wouldn't say not optimistic about, but it just feels like from here on up, and maybe there's one or two more teams that we aren't as excited about. But from here on up, man, we're talking about teams with maybe not exactly playoff expectations, but legit playoff hopes. There's talent up and down the roster for a lot of these teams. There's a lot of true strength. So we're getting to a lot of these better teams, and it's going to be a lot more fun to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've had some recent comments that talk about our lack of optimism for the teams that we've done so far, which is totally fair. Like we talked about it, we needed that kind of self-reflection, and we understand that. But also, we were, like you said, we were doing teams not necessarily with the greatest hopes this year. So we were just, in my mind, we were justifying why they were ranked so low. But for fans of the teams, I understand you want something to be optimistic about, and we're going to try to give Broncos fans as much optimism as we can today, as we're diving into our first team in the teens, and that is, as I just said, the Denver Broncos at 19. So looking forward to diving into them. So without further ado, let's dive into it. And as we always do, got to start with the QB1, and that is Russell Wilson, who did not cook last year, was a previous cooker his entire career, he probably still has a strong Hall of Fame case, like outside of last year. Like it's kind of hard. Like I think that's a really good debate. But I mean, he was one of the best quarterbacks of our generation prior to last year. And I mean, there was rumors he might go to Washington, might go. There was another team on the table that I'm forgetting. Patriots, I think maybe.
It was. I know who you're talking about. That's gonna bug me.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But somebody threw another trade package out for Russell Wilson, and he decided that Denver was the only place he wanted to be, and obviously he was highly coveted, signs a big old contract, goes over there under Nathaniel Hackett last year, and it's an absolute dumpster fire. So not the best season for Russell last year, definitely a career worst by far, but we've been talking about it a little bit. Like, you can really only go up from here. Like, that was the absolute rock bottom for Russell Wilson last year. He gets another year with his weapons. He's in a new system, but that new system is Sean Payton, who's had some successful offenses in his time as a head coach. So what are we thinking about Russell Wilson this year, man? I mean, I think he's a top 15 quarterback this year, and we were talking about it before the podcast, like, that's not much, but it's definitely improvement over last year. So what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, that is the hope, quite honestly, here in Denver. We saw Russell Wilson play at a near bottom of the league level. Before I forget, I'm just going to say it. So the two teams that came to mind, I feel like Carolina was definitely in the mix for Russell Wilson. I feel like I remember that. And then recently we've had some rumors come out that the Eagles actually made a trade offer to the Seahawks for Russell Wilson. I believe whether the Seahawks denied or if it was the same situation where they didn't want to trade him within the NFC. Maybe Russell Wilson didn't want to go to Philly. I don't know what it was, but those were the two teams. But back to his last season here in Denver was not great. It was pretty much a disaster on a weekly basis. It was like a car crash where, it's so
not starting.
Okay, but I know. I know that saying that their quarterback situation was like a car crash is not extremely optimistic or whatever.
You kept going into it,
but it was like a car crash. It was like every week it felt like during those first 6 or 7 weeks they were on prime time, 5 or 6 of those games, and it was just like, oh my god, this is awful. And we were under this assumption for so many years was like, okay, just get Denver a quarterback, kind of like the same thing we talked about with Washington and we talked about with Carolina. We talked about with the Jets. Like, they've got this great defense and they've got weapons. They've got a good offensive line. Just get them a quarterback. They'll be right in it. And they went out and they got him, and it went backwards somehow from, Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. Russell Wilson, among guys that had 400 dropbacks last year, was 18th of 22 guys in PFF passing grade, only in front of Davis Mills, Kyler Murray, Matt Ryan, and Justin Fields. So not exactly the greatest group of passers outside of Kyler Murray, who we know also did not have a great season last year. But it's really going to be a matter of what Sean Payton can do with this reclamation project. He obviously took a year off himself from after leaving the Saints, gets this job here. There was even some late buzz that it could have been DeMeco Ryans here. But then once DeMeco Ryans kind of settled in on Houston, Sean Payton was somehow the second choice there. And we'll talk about Sean Payton and what he's going to bring to this team in a little bit. But I'm much more optimistic than I would have been at like the end of last year for what Denver could be this year. And I have a better feeling about Russ. This is a guy who, like you said, has put together a Hall of Fame career to this point. I really would give it probably, what do you say, 70 to 80% chance he goes in the Hall at some point, maybe not first ballot, but he's going
to be one of those
he's a
guys
Super Bowl
that,
champion.
It's really hard. He'll sit on the edge of the Hall of Fame for a while. He's better than, but you think about some of those other edge guys. Phillip Rivers, he's better than Phillip Rivers. Eli Manning, he's better than Eli Manning. So I think he is a Hall of Famer. I think 70-80% is solid.
Yeah. And so, like we said, Super Bowl champion. He also had one Super Bowl appearance, a second Super Bowl appearance. Every year that he was the starting quarterback in Seattle, it felt like they were in it. I feel like he made the playoffs for 7 of his first 9 seasons or 8 of his first 9 seasons. But on the flip side, he has never once in his career received a single MVP vote. So, kind of a thing that he gets made fun of a little bit for, but that is what it is. But there is Hall of Famer in his DNA. He has it. There's Hall of Famer arguably in Sean Payton's DNA as well. So hopefully those two guys can come together and really fix this because they have an opportunity here. I know they're in a division with Kansas City and the Chargers as well, but this is a good team that really could make a run if he can even get back to a top 12 level of play, much less the level of play that we're used to seeing from Russ.
Yeah, for sure. The ceiling is this Broncos game could be extremely good this year if Russell Wilson plays to how he played. Even he doesn't have to be peak Russ, but 3 years ago, if you get that Russ this year, this team could cause some problems. That's for sure. Last thing I'll say is obviously the running ability's gone. He's not going to be able to do that this year, but I think he plays he could play a very similar game to what Drew Brees did in his final years in New Orleans. And he supported Michael Thomas. Those offenses were really good, and it was kind of dink and dunk stuff. But I think Russell Wilson, if you just limit him to that and a late career Drew Brees, I think he could do it. So I'm optimistic for the situation in Denver as far as the quarterback goes this season. But we're feeling just about the same, a little better about the playmakers that the Denver Broncos have going into the 2023 season. So let's take a look. So start out with probably, he's disappointed so far. Has that been his own doing? Not necessarily. It's just been a really bad quarterback situation his first 3 years in the league. But he came on at the end of the season, and that is Jerry Jeudy. Of course, I'm not hyping him up because I made a big Dynasty trade for him with a guy that may or may not be on this podcast. But yeah, that's cool. But I'm super high on Jerry Jeudy. There's a reason I traded for him this year in Dynasty. So I think he'll be able to. He's got the talent to be a top 10 wide receiver in this league. It's just a matter of opportunity and a matter of things falling right for the Broncos this year and Russell Wilson playing up to potential. But Jerry Jeudy, he's awesome. Courtland Sutton used to be awesome. has a 1,000-yard season under his belt, got a huge contract, and has really stunk it out. He's a candidate to be traded sometime this year, depending on who wants to pick up that sort of contract. But there have been talks about trading Sutton, so we'll see what happens there because they still have Tim Patrick there. They drafted Marvin Mims. They still have KJ Hamler. So that's a deep wide receiver room, and Sutton really hasn't shown anything recently to prove that he still belongs there. To the tight end position, and you find out Greg Dulcich is there, who they drafted last season, pretty high. And then Albert O was there for a while, but he's not there anymore. And then in the running back room, they've got Javonte Williams, who was expected to have a great season last year, but struggled with injury, didn't really get opportunity like we expected him to. And now they brought in Samaje Perine in the offseason as their new number 2 back to replace Melvin Gordon. And Samaje Perine is probably going to have a solid role, just like Melvin Gordon did, and we won't understand why. But a great, solid group of playmakers for the Denver Broncos this season. Who are you most excited about?
I mean, as much as it hurt me to trade him away, Jerry Jeudy finished the season very strong last year. Once I wouldn't say their offense got their stuff together because they really didn't. But I think Jerry Jeudy, I will say, you did not agree with me when I said that if he had a good quarterback that Terry McLaurin would be a top 10 receiver. But you do agree with me for Jerry Jeudy.
Terry wasn't a first-round pick from Alabama, who was one of the premier wide receiver prospects of the past 10 years.
I think if you put Terry McLaurin in Jerry Jeudy's place, I think we're not talking about the Broncos right now. I think we're talking about the Broncos a couple of days from now, in my opinion. I think...
Okay, that's totally fair. And that's because Terry has had time to develop, 3... I mean...
No, they were 1 year apart. They were 1 year apart.
Yeah.
I think Jeudy came into the league young, if I'm not mistaken. But Terry's...
Yeah.
How old is Terry?
27, I want to say. 26, maybe.
Because Judy's 24. That's one of his big... that's a lot of the hype around him that he's only 24 and he's going into year 4 now. I love Javonte Williams. I think he's a phenomenal player. It hurts me because he was in the same draft as Najee, and I love Najee, so they're always going to get compared. And when Javonte Williams goes and breaks a bunch of tackles, that's all everybody wants to talk about. But I still think he's a great player. Was able to have him for the first half of last year, traded for him as an RB1, then he tore his ACL 2 weeks later, so that was fun. Wasn't very happy to see that, but still, I think he's one of the best. I'm sorry to bring my fantasy stuff into this. I wanted to read the Dynasty trade, but I thought you'd get
You could hear the trauma in that sentence.
Yeah.
You were like, so that wasn't very fun.
That wasn't great. But he's one of the best tackle breakers we have in the league now at the running back position. I think the Perine signing is going to be interesting to really see how that works out because I don't think they'll use him like they did Melvin Gordon because Melvin Gordon wasn't getting the receiving work. But Perine kind of did a lot of that in Cincinnati. They've liked to spell their backs here, but that was also not Sean Payton's offense. There's nobody here from Nathaniel Hackett's staff. Really, they cleaned house last year, so we'll see how Sean Payton likes to address this. We've obviously seen years in New Orleans where they had a Darren Sproles type player. We saw the Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara split for so long, and then once they didn't really have a formidable guy to back him up, we saw Latavius Murray in New Orleans for a few years. Kamara was being the RB, he was getting 60, 70, 80% of snaps on some weeks. So maybe they used Javonte Williams like that, but the money they put into Samaje Perine kind of leads me to believe that he'll be getting a good amount of the work here. Albert O, believe it or not, is still here. Guess where he is on the depth chart? Fourth.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Dude, he was so hyped up.
I never got the Albert O hype.
Time.
I never got it. I never understood it.
That's insane. Fourth on the depth chart? Come on, dog.
Obviously, Greg Dulcich, Chris Manhertz, who they got from Jacksonville. He's behind Adam Troutman, who was with New Orleans last year, spent some time there, and then it's Albert O. So, yeah, I think the Albert O era, those that were holding on to him in Dynasty, I think it's time.
Is another guy. Troutman is another guy that
got
goes into the same conversation.
Last year.
Jeez.
Because it's just this guy could start at tight end. That's where tight end is. I don't want to make this a fantasy rant, but that's where the tight end position is. Dude, if you start in an offense like that may not have 4 or 5 really good pass catching options, you're going to get 4 targets a game, and sometimes that's good enough and to be a valuable dynasty or valuable fantasy.
What's up, Chig Okonkwo?
Yeah.
What's up, Chig? Good to see you. That's who we're talking about. Yeah. Basically, that's the definition.
Hey man.
Yeah,
I'm talking about like your Cade Ottons and your Logan Thomases. I'm not putting any Terps in that circle, buddy. I won't do it. I won't put any Terps in there. That's a derogatory
the Logan Thomas hurts.
Yeah, I had to throw that at you.
Logan Thomas hurts, man. That was a contract, but anyway.
We'll wrap up the wide receivers here. Cortland Sutton, man, he got a 3-year $60 last year, if I'm not mistaken. That's not looking good. That's really not looking good. I don't know if he'll ever be able to return to that 2019 form that we saw him at. I forced myself to buy into the Cortland Sutton hype, and I regretted it. I've never been a Cortland Sutton guy. I was like, last year, I was like, oh, maybe we're getting a little post hype here. No, there's a reason why he's not getting hype up anymore. It's because he smells.
No.
They will be getting Tim Patrick back, who tore his ACL. It was kind of like a forgotten piece that they didn't have last year. I'm not saying that that's the reason why their offense faltered as much as it did, but they gave him a contract extension last offseason. He tears his ACL in camp, and they don't have him all year. And he was a legit contributor for them the year before last, before Russell Wilson got there. So having him back will be nice. I also really like Marvin Mims. I think that Marvin Mims could be taking some snaps away from either Tim Patrick or Cortland Sutton here. He's a big play guy, and more importantly, Sean Payton drafted him. Sean Payton didn't draft any of these other receivers. Sean Payton drafted Marvin Mims. He was a second-round pick. Like, that matter. I think he was their first selection in this draft because they didn't have a first-round pick. He was picked at like 60 or 62. So he had to be at least one of their first selections. That also really, really matters when you're talking about who could be getting playtime here. So I definitely think that there's a chance that he takes the job of maybe like a Tim Patrick, or at least cutting into his snaps pretty significantly. But overall, it's a very middling group. We've rambled on. Holy shit, we're at 17 minutes. We have rambled on about this for entirely too long now. But for the fucking group that we have,
we're trying to be optimistic.
Yes, listen to all that positivity that I just said, though, except for the Cortland Sutton piece. Yeah. Moving on.
Let's move on. Last thing I'll say, Sean Payton seems to have a love affair with Tim Patrick. He's been speaking very highly of him and talking about him like a franchise wide receiver. That might be just a load of bullshit, but we'll see how that goes. So let's move on from the playmakers, and let's dive into this offensive line, which we have ranked pretty high, man. We've got them ranked at 13. Which is definitely towards the top of the league for sure. And as always, I'll let you take it away.
Appreciate it, Kane. I really do. You're a doll. That light. Denver's offensive line, I kind of felt like 13 was a little bit high for this group as well, but they did make the big sign. Wow, you're not going to be able to read that center. It's been driving me insane. The last 3 times that we've had a graphic, I've had to squish some names together because it's 2 really long names next to each other in Lloyd Cushenberry and Mike McGlinchey. But Mike McGlinchey, I thought that was a really surprising
This is why I don't talk about offensive linemen.
Fair. Yeah, this is the analysis that you guys come here and are looking for. Mike McGlinchey, I really thought that was not a weird signing, but just kind of surprising. I really didn't think that they would go out and spend big money on a tackle. This is a solid offensive line. I just didn't think that was a position they'd be targeting, especially at the price that they gave Mike McGlinchey. I believe it was a 5-year, $80 million, or maybe 5-year, $75. That's a pretty big number, even in today's tackle market. They also go out and get Ben Powers. Now, that's a sneaky, underrated signing that I like a lot. Ben Powers has been very good for the Ravens for the last few years. You've got Quinn Miners coming back. I believe was a second-round pick 2 years ago. He's got the starting job here again. Lloyd Cushenberry, average starting center, not really losing anything, not really gaining anything. He's just kind of a guy. But Garrett Bowles is one of the better left tackles in the NFL, is the best tackle on this line. That's why he's the biggest player on this graphic. So once again, this is a solid group. It's not going to kill you. I don't think that they're going to be mowing teams down because of this offensive line. But I really I like the fact that they're adding to it, and I like the fact that they're trying to be like, okay, we're going to do whatever we can to keep Russ upright, to keep Russ straight. And why are you smiling? Are you smiling because of being optimistic? I'm like doing this,
Yep.
like, this is awful. Want to be mean.
This is hard for us to do.
I mean,
But we're doing it for
I'm
the people.
doing.
At 19, and it's only going to get more optimistic from here.
Oh yeah.
So wait until you get a load of as we keep going. But yeah, solid offensive line. I mean, they probably should have done more last year. I mean, if they were that good, they would have, been able to protect Russell Wilson a little bit more. I know he's really bad, but he would have performed better, and they would have had a better run game. Like their run game wasn't elite last year. Like they definitely could have performed better on the O-line, but like you said, got plenty of names to back them up. But let's move on to the front seven, and we've got them ranked towards the bottom of the barrel in the league. We've got them ranked at 29th, and honestly, like I was talking about it before the podcast, like Randy Gregory sticks out on this list, and it shouldn't because Randy Gregory might not even be that great anymore. But who are you excited to see this year on this Broncos front seven?
Yeah, Randy Gregory was their big offseason. I would say their big offseason acquisition last year because obviously that was Russell Wilson. But he was their big signing. When that happened, I was like, how do they still have the money to do this? Like, very rarely do you see, like, if the Jets were to go out and sign, like, another player at the top of their market after they traded for Aaron Rodgers this year. That would have been, like, pretty weird. But
right,
obviously, it's going to help them this year. Obviously, they don't have him last year. I think he got injured in week 4 or 5, ends up missing the rest of the year, which really hurt their front seven. Then the midseason trade of Bradley Chubb, which kind of signaled to the rest of the league that this isn't Denver's year. If they didn't have that figured out already by week 8 or 9 after watching some film, them trading away Bradley Chubb for a first-round pick definitely did the trick, I believe. And ultimately, that pick ends up being the pick that lands them Sean Payton. So you traded out Bradley Chubb for Sean Payton. We'll see how that works. But that really was like the dagger. We're talking 2 years ago. This was probably in the top 5 or 6 with Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. Now it's been completely overhauled here. Now you got Randy Gregory and Zach Allen, who was another big signing from this offseason, who they gave a pretty significant amount of money on a per year basis as well. I believe he was getting somewhere in the 12 to 13 million a year range, maybe a little bit more than that. You do have Baron Browning, who showed some flashes last year. I liked a lot of what I saw from him. He's a converted linebacker. He's now playing edge. Was a little inconsistent, and that was kind of the problem with him. But I think that if they can figure some stuff out with him, work with him a little bit more, he's got the tools to do it. And, you've got a nice edge pair of Browning and Randy Gregory, and then Zach Allen kind of playing like an actual end role. The main problem, or not the problem, because again, optimism, is this linebacker pair. They did grade well last year, but you're not super, you can't ask a whole lot of Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton. Like, they can't run a whole lot of cover 2 because you're not having either of these guys chase a post like you would. I know this is like the extreme example of like a Fred Warner or somebody like that. Like, you can't have those guys doing those things because quite frankly, they're just not capable. But they're downhill going forward types of linebackers who are going to be fine for you, but they're not going to really help you. As I sit here, is 29 maybe a little low? Maybe. Because you got talent here, like Randy Gregory, Zach Allen. We look up, we have the Falcons. I mean, Calais Campbell, Onyemata, Grady Jarrett. The Rams have Aaron Donald, so we kind of had to put them to a certain height, but we obviously know the rest of the situation there. This isn't a strength for this team, obviously.
It's hard.
The real strength of this defense is going to be up next with the secondary, but I do think that this is a room with some room to improve, with Randy Gregory potentially coming back. I mean, he was a monster in his last year in Dallas. Like, people forget about that. That's why he got a 5-year, $80 million deal in Denver. And if he can return to that form, and we see Zach Allen continue to produce like he did, we see a little bit more development from Baron Browning. Maybe we're talking about this as a top 20 group next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the optimism that we're looking for here. And I want to walk back my Randy Gregory thing anymore because it was unoptimistic. And this is the last time I'll harp on the optimism. But Randy Gregory, like, I didn't mean to say that we don't know if he's good anymore because he was great the last time we saw him in Dallas, but it's been a long time since we saw him last play football. So that's the only reason I said that. But according to the last time we saw him, he'll be great. So let's move on to the secondary rankings, as you mentioned, for the Denver Broncos. And we're looking up here. They are ranked sixth, almost said seven, but sixth among all 32 teams in the National Football League when it comes to their secondary. And it really starts with none other than Patrick Surtain. I mean, he's developed into a top 3 corner in this league, at least. Like, I mean, there's an argument to be said that he could be one. But, I mean, you got Sauce. Like, he'll definitely give him the competition. But nonetheless, he's been phenomenal ever since he entered the league and probably our next shutdown corner. And then we got Justin Simmons there as well, a multi-time Pro Bowler, one of the best safeties in the league. So you got 2 guys like that on your secondary, and that's definitely helping them get to this 6 overall ranking. You got Kareem Jackson there as well, but solid group of secondary players. And who do you see bursting out this year? I mean, you got glowing things to say about Surtain?
Yeah, I mean, I love Surtain. Surtain was not my number 1 corner in his class, in that class with J.C. Horn. And, I mean, I guess it really was just J.C. Horn and then a tier gap down to, Caleb Farley, Eric Stokes, those guys. But still was my number 1 corner, was one of my top players in that class, and has proved to be one of the top players really in the NFL. Like, I think he's CB1 in the NFL right now. I hear your Sauce arguments. I hear your Jalen Ramsey, your Jair Alexander arguments. I think that's better than Alexander. I think we need to send a petition his way. Yeah.
Jair Alexander.
Yeah.
I needed to say without the mic muted.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like
rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. It makes him sound a lot more sophisticated than Alexander. We'll talk. We should have talked about that the other day with the Packers episode. We're really not good at this. Okay.
Phenomenal quarterback nonetheless.
Yeah.
Jeez, man, this fucking
sorry. But this secondary ranking is carried by that cornerback and safety duo. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, is definitely the best pairing of corner and safety in the NFL. Maybe AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates are knocking on your door a little bit, but I'd still go with these 2. The thing that really puts Surtain ahead of me is he's also one of the best run defending corners in the NFL. Like, that really matters as well. To go with elite coverage ability, he's also towards the top in grading for run defense. Justin Simmons has been grading well throughout the last few years, hasn't really been like the best safety in the NFL. He's still in that argument. You're in that conversation with Minka, with Derwin, with Jesse Bates. Like, it's really those 4 on a year-to-year basis, and it's probably going to be like that for the next few years. The rest of this group, you've got your question marks. Kareem Jackson is like 57 years old now, and you're starting to wonder, like, I'd almost guarantee you that he gets a coaching job as soon as he retires, but it's just a matter of when they're going to do that. They've already done the thing where they move him back from corner to safety. Can't really move him much back further than that. So I think he might have one more good year left in him. It's just a matter of when when is he going to realize that the hourglass is empty. You got Damari Mathis and Kawhi Williams here. Kawhi Williams coming over from San Francisco. Solid player. Not going to, move the needle a whole lot. Same thing with Damari Mathis. The only problem is with us ranking them this high, if they lose Simmons or they lose Surtain, and I know that that's the case for a lot of teams, if they lose their best player in a certain position, their ranking is probably going to go down by a lot. But if they lose one of these guys for any significant length of time, it could be trouble, not just for this secondary, not just for this defense, but for this entire team, because we had the front 7 at 28th. If they lose Surtain, this is one of the lower rated cornerback groups in the league. You just have Justin Simmons back there, and they're going to be guarding, for 4, 5, 6 seconds because the front 7, is not going to be able to generate as much pressure as a lot of the other front 7s in the league. So that keeps the offense, on the field all the time. And from what we saw last year, that's not exactly what we want here in Denver. But nonetheless, Surtain's phenomenal. Justin Sims is phenomenal. It's just a matter of can these other guys hold up, on the other side.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a group that can lock down guys and create turnovers. And I mean, if this group can create enough turnovers this year and play like one of the better secondaries in the league, like the sixth one that we have them ranked as, I mean, it'll make it life a lot easier on Russell Wilson and the rest of the offense. And Sean Payton will be able to help a lot with that on the defensive side as well, because, I mean, he had some great years on the defensive side in New Orleans. So, got to love that. But let's move on from the secondary and let's dive into the guy I just mentioned, and that is Mr. Sean Payton, who's had a little bit of an interesting last, 10 years or so, I guess. He started out, I mean, I don't even know where he started, but he was a great coach for the New Orleans Saints for a long time. And then to TB after Drew Brees retired. And it was kind of like, oh, how long will Sean Payton be in TV? Because we kind of expect him to be a head coach somewhere at some point. And he was just waiting for the right opportunity. And he saw Denver as that right opportunity. And we've got him ranked as the fifth, or this coaching staff overall, as the fifth best coaching staff in football this year. I think Sean Payton's going to make some waves this year, man. I mean, this is a guy that's been in touch with the league. Like, it's not like he's an old guy that's just old school football and it's just out of touch. Like, this is a guy that's stayed in the league and he'll be able to adapt. Like, I mean, Sean Payton's definitely got, outside of Bountygate, he's definitely got a Hall of Fame case for sure.
Because he does have a Super Bowl. The Saints were almost always competitive. They had a few years there where they were a little rough. I think Bountygate's going to hold him out, regardless of whether he should be in or not. I don't think he'll get in because of Bountygate. Like, people forget, that season after Bountygate, they lost everything. A lot of their defense was suspended. It was a very weird time in the NFL, was the post-Bountygate stuff. Also, John, I don't know that this is completely unrelated, but you feel like that would, and I know the Hall of Fame is much different than getting a TV job, but Jonathan Vilma, 2 or 3 years after he retired, was right in a booth. And I kind of thought, not that it's like a DUI or drugs or anything like that, but I feel like he would have gotten passed over a little bit because of the Bountygate stuff. Not saying that he should be. We need to cut this out. This is awful. Anyway, Sean Payton.
Bountygate is definitely in the conversation when you talk about Sean Payton.
Yeah, this isn't a legacy conversation about Sean. It's what he's going to bring to Denver, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the Denver Broncos. Right. I'm sorry for getting away from that. But he's going to bring his system over here that I think is going to help Russell Wilson a lot. It's going to make it much more quick stuff. We saw that in Drew Brees. Sean Payton also has some significant experience working with a smaller quarterback and having success with that guy. Also has been able to produce multiple phenomenal receivers as well throughout his years. We saw Marcus Colston be great. We saw Michael Thomas be great in New Orleans. We also saw Jimmy Graham be great. So maybe the way that Sean Payton likes to use tight ends maybe pushes back a little bit of how Russell Wilson doesn't like to use tight ends. Maybe we see a little bit more Greg Dulcich this year. Who knows as far as that goes. Flipping over to the offensive coordinator.
Good point.
Kind of the opposite kind of conversation. I really had to censor Mitchell's conversation around Joe Lombardi after Joe Lombardi spent the last 2 years as the offensive coordinator with the Chargers, and Mitchell didn't not have a whole lot of nice words to say about Joseph there. So we kind of had to ring that in a little bit. Not
optimistic.
Yeah, absolutely. We do not do that anymore. So kind of to rein that in a little bit, but it's worrisome. He's not going to be calling plays here, which is the main reason why I'm not going crazy about the fact that they hired him. He knows Sean Payton's scheme. He knows a lot of the terminology. Sean Payton's scheme is one of the hardest to understand in the NFL. It's a lot of terminology that needs to be flipped over from team to team. With all those guys came in with Russ, and Russ had to learn all of Nate Hackett stuff. Now they got to learn it all again with Sean Payton. So that'll be one of the things that might, struggle for them for the first few weeks. And we saw how things got off the rails last year when they struggled through the first few weeks. They also bring in Vance Joseph here, coming over from Arizona, right? Why did I think it was San Francisco? No, that was D'Amico Ryans. Yeah, Arizona. Obviously didn't put together the greatest defense last year, but is one of the better defensive-minded coaches in the NFL, or has had a head coaching job in the past, has been in the NFL for a long time. That was one of Sean Payton's things, was like, we need a big-time DC here, whether it be a Vic Fangio or somebody like that. Like, that was one of the conversations, and maybe Vic Fangio comes back to Denver to pair up with Sean Payton. They ultimately bring in Vance Joseph. They're going to do a lot of the same things that Dennis Allen did in New Orleans, where it's a lot of attacking 3-4 fronts that are going to hopefully help this pass rush, because it's not going to be like a send 4 and sit everybody back. Like, they're going to be sending a lot of stunts, getting these guys free, and that's how they're going to generate pressure, and that's how they're going to help this secondary. So all around, we have this as the 5th best coaching staff in the NFL, and if there's a reason why you're optimistic for Denver, it's what they've done to overhaul this staff.
Absolutely. And I mean, Joe Lombardi, as you said, did not have the most glowing offense in LA with the Chargers last year. But he does have a lot of experience with Sean Payton. He worked with Sean Payton starting in 2007 and worked for him through 2013. He was offensive assistant. He was a quarterback's coach. Then he was quarterback's coach again in 2016. So he's got plenty of familiarity with Sean Payton. And then Vance Joseph, like, people forget, he was the head coach of the Broncos at one point. So it's like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, I didn't realize, I had to look it up to like confirm. I thought I was tripping, but like, he has familiarity with Denver. So like, it's not just Sean Payton, as you said, that makes this coaching staff so great. It's the collective. And I think if you're looking for reasons to be optimistic, the coaching staff is.
I really like, now I know that that's such a small thing, but like, now that I'm sitting here and talking myself through it, obviously we don't feel glowingly about Joe Lombardi, but I really like this staff. And one thing that I, commend George Payton for doing is there's no salary cap for the coaching staff. You can come in and you can sign, Sean Payton to $18 million a year. You can go get the best quarterbacks coach, the best running backs coach, Davis Webb, quarterbacks coach here for Denver. Just a little tidbit for you. But they can spend as much as they want on this coaching staff. You can go assemble the greatest coaching staff ever, financially anyway, and there are no limitations to that. Like, no one can stop you. There's no salary cap for it. So I think that's something that these teams, especially like these teams that are getting bought, like Washington, for example, would not be surprised if, Josh Harris wants to bring a winner into DC, start paying up for these coaches. And, you can't,
we already started.
You can only limit how much you pay the players, but there's no limit to what you can do for coaches. So big ups to him on that, and that's why we have this coaching staff as high as we do.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a lot of reasons to be excited for this team this year, for sure. But let's dive into the schedule, and let's pick what we think this team is going to do this year as far as their over-under and win total. So their strength of schedule this year is ranked 12th. The Vegas over-under is 8.5, and considering it's 17 games, considering it can't get much worse than last year, considering that basically everything points up for this team from last year, I think I'm going to go over. I think I'm very optimistic about this season for the Denver Broncos, man. They do play in a very tough division, so that'll be hard. But, I mean, look down the schedule. Like, God, they play Kansas City twice. Play Chargers twice.
They get the AFC East,
play Buffalo,
which is my thing, is they get the AFC East, which is arguably the toughest division in football. We talked about last season with Russ coming over. We were like, is the AFC West the best division we've ever seen in the history of sports? And the AFC East has quickly topped that in, one season. So they play that. They also play the NFC North as well. I hate to do this in the optimism episode, but I think I'm going to have to go under here for Denver. To get to 9 wins means this team is probably going to be like playing week 18 for like a win and in type scenario of making the playoffs. And quite frankly, with how stacked the AFC is, we have a good amount of AFC teams left in our power rankings here. I can't see that being the situation here for Denver. I really can't. Like, as much as I want to be optimistic about Russell Wilson and Sean Payton and that pairing, I don't know if Sean Payton can fix that overnight. And maybe it's better, but does Russell Wilson return to being a top 8 quarterback? I don't know if I see that. And in this conference where pretty much, your top 8 quarterbacks, you're talking about Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Aaron Rodgers, Justin Herbert. They're all here. Like, they're all, 2 of them are in your division. 2 of them are in the division that you're playing. And, there's a lot of tough quarterbacks on this schedule. You throw Tua in there. You throw, I wouldn't call him a quote-unquote tough quarterback. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback.
Hey,
Watson
whoa.
in there. Tough quarterback is like, we're like, oh shit, we got this guy this week. Nobody's saying that about Kirk Cousins, respectfully, towards Kirk Cousins. Quarterback series star Kirk Cousins. Nobody's losing sleep over Kirk Cousins, respectfully. But, respectfully.
To be honest, I thought you said that about Tua, and I was like, that is a very poor choice of words when it comes to talking about Tua Tagovailoa. But
I don't know if anybody's losing sleep over Tua, but we'll talk about that another day. But this is still, we talked about, this is the 12th schedule. What was the colorfulness strength of schedule coming in for you? I tried to get a little different. Like, notice the yellow for the Chargers as opposed to the usual, that lightning bolt blue. We also went red for the Texans instead of that navy blue because they're playing them on the road. You want to be able to see that they're playing them in week 13. We even went red for the Bills as well. You're only...
they don't pass the color test. This is a rainbow.
Your only dark points are Green Bay and Washington. And really, other than that, you're looking at positive colors on the brightness scale.
Silver and black.
Silver, but the thing is, that's still like a brightish color. Like white is... Okay.
What are we doing?
Okay. Is white a bright color?
There's an argument to be made. It might be the brightest color.
Exactly. What's silver, brighter?
though.
I know, but I'm saying, like, that's definitely more that silver, that gray is leaning more white than it is black. But what's brighter, a yellow light or a white light? A white light. So I would say that white, and I know again that is silver, so fair play. But this is all right. We know 1 out of 10 on the colorfulness strength of schedule. We're gonna do this for every episode, by the way, from now on.
All right. I'm going to go, in comparison to the ones that we've seen so far, on a 1 to 10 scale, I'm going to go 7.
I'd give you 7. Now I want to just start pulling the littlest color that they have in their logo. Like, they had this color 20 years ago, but it's really bright, and I'm going to pop it on there as their thing.
You're going to be searching for specific colors in Canva that are number 100.
Top 5 brightest colors
87. Just watch a YouTube video montage. All right, we are officially off the rails here. But last thing I'll say about this schedule slide is we were talking about the playoffs. Like, if they do win 9 games, then they're knocking on the door of the playoffs. And you think back to last year, with 17 games now, there's a solid chance that team makes the playoffs. We had a 9-8 Jacksonville make the playoffs, 10-7 Chargers, 10-7 Ravens, 9-8 Dolphins,
but
8-9 Bucks.
One thing,
9-7-1 Giants, 9-8-1 Seahawks.
One thing that's a little different there is Jacksonville, who you mentioned, is a 9-win. They win their division. Same thing with Tampa Bay. That's in the NFC, right. And that's a whole different thing.
I know.
We also had 2 teams with 9 wins in the New England Patriots and my very own Pittsburgh Steelers have 9 wins and miss the playoffs. So I could see that happening. Like, if they win 9 wins, or if they get 9 wins, they could be that team on the outside looking in with 9 wins. Maybe they don't have the tiebreakers. We're really dissecting here and doing some very pessimistic projecting. But I'll tell you, if they go over, they're definitely knocking on the door. And I'll tell you this, if they go over, it's because Russell Wilson's a top 12 quarterback in the NFL. They will not win 9 games if Russell Wilson is even close to what he was. Like, in Russell Wilson's best game last year, he was bad. And if he's that guy all year next year, they're not winning 9 games. Like, he's really got to step it up and return to Seattle Russell Wilson, which I'm sure he can do, especially with Sean Payton here. But, like I said, on his best day last year, he was not a good quarterback. So he's really got to pick it up heading into this year. And, if he doesn't, we're looking at Denver as having like one of the roughest looking futures in the NFL because of that contract and because there's almost no way out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth. Couldn't say it any better myself, personally. So, all right, let's move on and start to wrap this up with the ranking slide. And as we mentioned all episode, they came in at 19th overall. We put their offense, as far as the Blitz Pod consensus goes, at 17. The defense ranks out at 19. And then their championship window, we have it as closed 2 to 3 years away, which you could look at it like it's open right now because, I mean, this time last year it was certainly open and it looked like they were diving in. So, like, roster construction-wise, they're buying in, but you're going to have to – this is a roster that hasn't been rebuilt yet and has to be rebuilt at some point. You got the wide eyes right now, man. I mean, when they traded for Russell Wilson, it was like, okay, this team could, like, possibly win a division, maybe go to the Super Bowl. Like, that was the talk this time.
I don't know if you're in the same room or the same house that we're in, but the championship window in Denver at this current moment on July 16th at 9:54 in the year of our Lord 2023 is closed. Not open at this moment in time.
I would say the playoff
window is
I
open.
need to declare.
I will grant you that. They are in the, because obviously, we talk about it, the analogy is it's a circle. Championship windows like this, playoff windows like this. Like you can get right back in it a lot quicker. The playoff window's bigger.
Dude. You have worked that analogy so well.
I'm gonna pitch it to Apple and see if they can use it for anything. I just want to put it on the radar.
They're gonna take Steve Jobs out of the cryo chamber. He needs to hear that one. But continue.
But this was a tough one because a lot of the teams we've had leading up to this don't have, like I've talked about, they don't have a quarterback in place where, what good, bad, or whatever, they've either got a young guy or they've got a stopgap guy or it's Jordan Love who's somewhere in the middle. Denver is locked into Russell Wilson. They have to have Russell Wilson be the starting quarterback for the next 2 to 3 years. I don't know what the hell. I'm just going to call him out. I'm sorry. Mitchell fucking put in the season analysis that they could be looking at Caleb Williams or Drake May next year. Caleb Williams and Drake May cannot work for this team because they're going to have to pay their backup $50 million a year. And nobody's trading for Russell Wilson, regardless of what kind of season he has this year. Russell Wilson's not going to be tradable just at this age with that money. So
this team will not be bad enough.
Oh, yeah, and that too.
To a Caleb Williams selection.
And like that, what happened last year was the absolute worst thing that could have happened to the Denver Broncos, the worst thing that could have happened to Russell Wilson, and they still won 5 games, and I mean, that's obviously not great. They ended up, their pick, which ended up in Seattle's, their pick was 5th, and they were literally the worst thing that could have happened. I can't see that happening this year. If we get a healthy Javonte Williams, we, see a healthy season from these receivers, obviously Sean Payton coming in as the coach, can't see them winning less than 5 games this upcoming season to be in the running for that kind of situation. But the reason why this is so hard is because Russell Wilson's here and we don't know what he's going to be. We can't be like, oh yeah, there's like, it's not like they've got Bryce Young where it's like, oh yeah, 2 to 3 years from now, he should be really good. Russell Wilson 2 to 3 years from now could be like completely unstartable in the NFL, but they're going to have to run him out there because of how much they're paying him and how they have no outs for this quarterback thing. And it's not like it's like Jimmy Garoppolo or something where it's like, well, we got 1 year of this and then next year we could be, looking at our young quarterback of the future. Like, it's just a matter of, can they fix Russ? Can Sean Payton figure out this Russell Wilson thing? If yes, I don't know if we're like in that like jump right into quarterback or jump right into championship window type scenario, because this roster, like we pointed out, still does have some holes on it. This isn't a perfect group of weaponry. The front 7 is still a little questionable. The secondary's got some holes on it. Every team has holes, but even if Russell Wilson returns to that top 8 form, are we talking about a championship team here in Denver in the same division as the Kansas City Chiefs, in the same division as the Chargers, in the same conferences, the Bills, the Jets, the Ravens, the Bengals? Like, if they were in the NFC, like I said, we'd probably be talking about them a week and a half from now, just because of the competition that they're going to be playing. We'd feel a lot better about them, but they're in such a stacked conference that I don't know if we can say that they're even close to a championship window. Just to touch on the offense-defense rankings before we wrap up here. 17th and 19th, I think that's very fair. I think these are two very middling groups. The one thing is the defense, the room to improve it's there, because we get Randy Gregory back, Zach Allen coming in. You still have one of the elite corners, one of the elite safeties in the NFL, but you're probably not going any higher than like 15, 14, 13, somewhere around there. With this offense, 17th, I wouldn't call this the benefit of the doubt, but it kind of was a little bit of like, well, we don't know what Russell Wilson could be. We feel a little bit better with Sean Payton coming in. If Russell Wilson is that guy, is that top 10-ish quarterback, we're probably talking about a top 10-ish offense. If Russell Wilson comes back and does the exact same shit as last year, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to be doing, what the conversation is going to be around Denver next year, but we're talking about a bottom 6 or 7 offense, because it's all going to run through him, quite frankly. And, is one of the biggest swing factors in the NFL is what Russell Wilson's going to do this season. And it could really shape the Broncos, shape the course of this division, and hell, maybe shape part of the future of the NFL, of, what Russell Wilson's going to be over these next few years. But it's going to be fun to watch for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, it was as bad as it was last year. It was fun. It was plenty of fun. All the Russell Wilson memes. Yeah, exactly. Like, not fun for anybody.
We should have known when Mile High Stadium was on fire in like June or July, and we saw that. Because I remember like the Thanos thumbnail. It's like, what was he cooking? And I put Russell Wilson's face. Yeah. I thought that was fucking hilarious. It didn't do well on Instagram, but I thought it was fucking hilarious.
I liked it, man. It was awesome. It was like, what's he doing in there? Yeah, exactly. But the title on this season for the Denver Broncos, will Russell Wilson cook once again? So we shall see in the 2023 season ahead. But that does it for our 19th ranked Broncos episode. Episode 18 coming out next, and we can't wait to bring the rest of the episodes out to you throughout the rest of the summer. So catch you later. Peace.